Welcome back. It was a crime which pushed everything else off the front pages. 3 men, all known criminals, found shot dead in the Essex countryside. It was a cold-blooded, professional killing. The victims had many enemies, but which one wanted them executed?
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. With hindsight, Craig Rolfe's descent into a life of crime seems almost inevitable. After all, his first view of the world was the grey walls of Holloway Prison. His mother, Lorraine, was serving 18 months after lying to police in a bid to protect her teenage lover. That lover had ruthlessly beaten her husband, Rolfe's dad, with a skittle until his skull was crushed like an eggshell. Tony Tucker was later to tell his gang members the sad story of Rolfe's birth, which had left him with a chip on his shoulder. Lorraine, then of Linford Drive, Basildon, had been seeing 19-year-old John Kennedy while her husband Brian worked as a market trader. On Christmas Eve 1968, the youngster crept into their home as the 28-year-old Brian lay asleep next to Lorraine. He killed him. When she was woken by the noise, Kennedy allegedly told her, "I have done it to prove how much I love you." Kennedy of Butneys, Basildon, and 23-year-old Lorraine were arrested and both charged with murder. Lorraine, who was already a mother of 3 and expecting Rolfe, told police, "I never touched him, honest on my baby's life." She was cleared of the murder charge, but sobbed as the judge sentenced Kennedy to life. Then, as he gave her 18 months for making false statements, Mr. Justice Bridge told her, quote, "I accept as the basis of my sentence that you were confronted with a dilemma when you realised your lover had murdered your husband. But I cannot escape from the conclusion that it was an event which caused satisfaction rather than distress, and you are prepared to do what lay in your power to see your lover escape punishment." Lorraine cried, "I'd done nothing." As she was led from the Sussex Assizes court supported by prison officers, she later said, quote, "I was 3 months pregnant with Craig when his dad was murdered. My family has been dogged by bad luck." Rolfe, a cocaine addict, became a gopher for Tucker when he joined his gang in the early 90s. He was probably his most trusted friend, and associates say he was quite possessive of Tucker. He was certainly implicated in some of the gang leaders' most dubious scams. In September 1995, they were approached by a part-time drug dealer who had £18,000 of cannabis to sell. Tucker and Rolfe took the man to Birmingham, where Tucker claimed to have a contact. While the dealer and Rolfe waited, Tucker disappeared with the drugs. He returned, saying police had busted them before he got the money. The dealer either had to accept the excuse or take them on. There is no police record of a bust in the city at that time. Rolfe lived with his long-term girlfriend in the commuter belt of Chafford 100. He also owned a property in Mill Green, Basildon. Their daughter was only 7 at the time of the killings. The following article comes from the 21st of January 1998 with the headline, "Lured to their doom." For Peter Theobald and Kenneth Jiggins, it started as a routine early morning drive to feed pheasants in the snow in the Essex countryside. But as the pair turned their vehicle up Workhouse Lane, an isolated farm track just off the main Chelmsford to Southend road, they got their first inkling that something was wrong. Blocking the padlocked gate at the end of the track was a metallic blue Range Rover that shouldn't have been there. Cursing, Mr. Jiggins braved the cold to get the vehicle shifted. As he walked up to the Range Rover, he could see there were people inside. But there was no response to his tapping. He began to think they were asleep, but then saw blood on the faces and realised they were dead. Things moved quickly after that. The emergency services descended on the scene in force, and within hours the names of the 3 dead men were known: Craig Rolfe, Pat Tate and Tony Tucker. All were from South Essex, all had been blasted with a shotgun at close range, and all were known criminals with connections with the drugs underworld. A massive manhunt was launched with no shortage of suspects. But true to the criminal code of silence, nobody was giving anything away. Except one man. Former small-time drug dealer and petty criminal Darren Nichols turned supergrass after police started to investigate his links with the triple killing. Getaway driver Nichols, who now has a new identity and a new life with police protection, led detectives to two men. Engineer Michael Steele, 55, and 36-year-old Jack Womes were questioned and later charged with the killing of the three men. Steele of St Mary's Road, Angers Green, Great Bentley, and Womes of Main Road, Brockford, Suffolk, both denied the charges. In court, they produced alibis and accused Nichols of fabricating the story to deflect attention away from his own involvement in the slayings. Security was tight with armed police surrounding Chelmsford Magistrates Court as the pair appeared in the dock for the first time. Then, on September the 2nd last year, the trial began at the Old Bailey and became one of the longest and most expensive criminal trials ever. During the months of questioning and cross-questioning, the patient and long-suffering jury of 8 women and 4 men listened as Supergrass Nichols relayed his version of events. The background to the assassinations was outlined to the court by Andrew Munday QC at the start of the trial. Tate had apparently threatened to kill Steele when he believed he was not properly compensated for substandard cannabis the court heard. But Steele and Womes decided they would eliminate the threat once and for all. They planned the triple killing to take place on a cold and snowy December night. Tate and his associates were lured to the scene on the promise of a new and substantial deal, this time in cocaine. As they relaxed in their Range Rover, 8 shots were fired rapidly into their heads from close range. But what prompted such terrible acts? The answer, it would appear, was a dispute over a consignment of very poor quality cannabis. Dealing in drugs is not an honourable trade. It is often the province of the double cross, the sting and the double deal. After the shootings, Steele said he felt a bit like the angel of death. He had done everyone a favour and got rid of the sort of people you would not want around, said Mr. Munday. Steele and Womes were convicted after Nichols described picking them up after the murders. He said he heard Womes laughing as he recalled how his partner's gun had fallen apart during the shootings. He said Steele would describe Womes as a cold-hearted bastard who had pointed his gun into the Range Rover and put shots into all 3 immediately. Nichols said he drove Womes to the scene thinking it was simply for a drug deal meeting. He was told to wait nearby until he was called. When he returned and the front door of the car opened, Nichols states, quote, "The light came on. I saw Jack's hands. He was wearing surgical-type gloves. They were covered in speckles of something which I could see was red," he added. He took it to be blood, and then he realised what was going on. If you would like to learn more about the Range Rover murders, then click on the video in front of you now. You will also see the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. Many thanks for joining me for this video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers. The following police statement is from Craig Anthony Rolfe, dated the 1st of December 1994. About 5 years ago, whilst at my friend's, Robert Emmons' flat, I met a man by the name of Kevin Whitaker. Over the years I've got to know Kevin fairly well. Having said that, we were not particularly close, although I have done him a few favours in the past. We've only gone out socially together on one occasion, and on average I would see him 2 to 3 times a month. The last time I saw Kevin was on Tuesday the 15th of the 11th 94 around mid-afternoon when I saw him standing in a telephone kiosk in Rectory Road, Pitsea, making a telephone call. I stopped the car I was driving, a blue Vauxhall Corsa, and had a conversation for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. I then drove off and left him to walk to Simon Smith's house. The last time I spoke to Kevin was sometime between 1500 and 1600 hours on Thursday the 17th of the 11th 94 when I phoned him from my home address to his father's address. This conversation lasted approximately 5 minutes, and all I can recall of the conversation was that he had mentioned that he had been to see his little boy in the morning. During all these conversations, at no time did Kevin mention that he was worried about anything or that he had any problems, other than the fact that he was a bit down having split up with his girlfriend. After I'd finished a conversation, I stayed at home watching the television whilst my girlfriend Donna Jaggers went to Lakeside Shopping Centre. Donna returned home approximately 6 p.m. the same day and we had our evening meal together. Having finished our meal, Donna and myself then left our home address and drove to Basildon in the blue Vauxhall Corsa, arriving there around 7 p.m. that evening at our friend's house at 1 Ames Green, Basildon. This is the home address of Steve Thomas and his girlfriend Michelle. Unfortunately, by the time we had arrived, Michelle had gone out to an aerobic class, so we only stayed for a short while, arriving home together at approximately 9 to 9:30 that evening. We watched television for a short while and then went to bed for the night. I didn't leave my house till around midday on Friday the 18th of the 11th 94, when I left my house to drive to Basildon to see friends. The following statement is from Philip Pullinger, dated the 8th of December 1995. At around 16:30 hours on Wednesday the 6th of December 1995, I was on duty in plain clothes in company with DC 2051 Williams in an unmarked police vehicle. At this time I left Grays Police Station and drove into Brook Road. As I did so, I saw a blue Range Rover, index number F424NPE, which was travelling in front of my vehicle. I was aware that Craig Rolfe was a user of this vehicle. The vehicle parked in Brook Road, adjacent to the front entrance to the police station. I parked my vehicle directly behind it. I got out of my vehicle, and as I did so, the driver and sole occupant of the Range Rover also got out. I recognised the driver to be a person whom I know to be Craig Rolfe. I called out to Rolfe and had a conversation with him regarding a future appointment to obtain a statement from his common law wife, Miss Jaggers. The conversation lasted for a few seconds, and as I recollect, Rolfe was wearing a black puffy leather jacket and tracksuit bottoms. I then returned to my vehicle. I did not see where Rolfe went as he walked away from his vehicle. I then left the scene. I can be certain that the male I spoke to was Craig Rolfe. Now, many of you will know that during this time period, Craig Rolfe was a disqualified driver and the Range Rover had no tax. But really the only small piece of detail that we can take from this statement in particular is what Craig Rolfe was wearing. Now, bearing in mind this sighting is at 4:30 in the afternoon, just around 2 hours before Rolfe is actually killed, supposedly. But a lot of people say, well, how could they have been dressed like that if they were going out to this meal? Why were they wearing jeans and bomber jackets and boots? Surely they were going to go home and get changed before they went out to this meal. How could they have made the meal on time? But I think they were going to literally go as they were dressed that evening, because Craig Rolfe has obviously gone off here. He's been wearing tracksuit bottoms. He's at some point in time gone home, changed his tracksuit bottoms into jeans, and then gone off to meet Tony and Pat. I believe that the way that they're dressed, they were literally just going to go straight from Rettendon to this meal. But obviously, that never happened. The next sighting of Craig Rolfe comes from Donna Jaggers, where she mentions the following in her statement. We were going out that night because they believed they were coming into money and they were going to have a pre-celebration. Craig phoned me at work in the afternoon and told me that Mickey Steele had contacted Pat Tate and said he wanted to meet with Tate and Tucker to go and look at somewhere they could land a light aircraft. Craig mentioned to me they'd been to or were going to, I can't remember which, to TGI Friday's restaurant at Lakeside. I later found out that this had been Tate, Tucker and Craig and a person called Peter Cuthbert. Craig wanted me to have something new to wear for the evening and took me to the Lakeside Shopping Centre at 17:45. He was driving the Range Rover and left to go and pick up Tony Tucker. Craig told me that he was going because he didn't want Tony to be in a position to say that he hadn't been any part in the arranging. I also understood that Craig was going to collect Tony Tucker from his house and they were going to meet Tate and Steele later. I did not have contact from Craig, Tate or Tucker after this point. Okay, now if we go a little bit further back in Donna Jaggers' statement, there's something that confuses me. It's confused me ever since I've read it and it still confuses me to this day. But just reading that part at the bottom could actually tie in with what I'm about to question here. Now, earlier on in her statement, she appears to be concerned about Craig's involvement. She tells him, look, I don't want you to have anything to do with this. This is getting out of control. Craig says to Donna the following words. He told me that Steele didn't know he was going to be driving, and he convinced me that he wasn't as heavily involved as the other two in what was going to happen. Now, what she is referring to here is the ripping off of Steele. The fact that they're going to get this consignment, they're going to cut it up into impure, then give it back to Steele. Now, when you look at Darren Nichols' statement, he also mentions that Steele is going to meet only Tate. Also mentioned at the bottom of Donna Jagger's statement is exactly the same thing. That Craig is going off to meet Tucker and they're going to meet Pat and Steele later. Now, when I read that part about Donna Jagger's being told by Craig, look, he doesn't know I'm going to be driving, I'm not as heavily involved as the other two, don't worry about it. What I took from that is that he was going to be nearby in the Range Rover whilst this deal was taking place, or whilst this robbery of the consignment was taking place. Steele wouldn't even know that he was ever there. That's the impression I get when I read that part of the statement. Not the fact that Steele doesn't know I'm going to be driving. Oh, surprise, here I am at the halfway house. That's not what I get when reading that statement. What I pick up from that statement is that Craig is saying, I would have been in the Range Rover, out of sight. Steele's not going to know I was even there. I'm not as heavily involved as Tate and Tucker. They're going to be robbing this consignment. I'm going to be there in the vehicle to drive them away. And that's what I get from that statement. I certainly don't think it's a case that he was going to turn up with Tucker and Tate at the halfway house, and then Steele's going to get in the vehicle and think, oh, Craig's driving. I wasn't expecting that. Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing, as we have two individuals who claim that Michael Steele was going to meet Pat Tate separately. We have Darren Nichols' official version of events, stating that when he got into the vehicle, when he got into the Hilux with Mick, he said he was going to meet Pat for a deal. We also have Donna Jagger's statement, where she claims that Craig had told her that he was going to pick up Tucker and he was going to meet up with Tate later on in the evening. Now, the problem that we have is that we have the eyewitness account from Tony Tucker's common law wife that he left his property around 6 o'clock. He was picked up by Rolfe, but there was no one home at Tate's address. We don't have any independent witnesses claiming, or stating I should say, that Tate got into the vehicle with Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. I guess the best eyewitness account we have is from the tyre fitter leaving work. It's in his statement that he says he sees the Range Rover. He knows Craig Rolfe from school when they used to go to school together. He could identify Rolfe being the driver, Tucker in the front passenger seat, and a large man in the rear between the two front seats. He couldn't state whether this was Tate due to the fact that it was dark, but he could definitely clearly recognise Craig Rolfe driving and Tony Tucker in the passenger seat. Where things get even more confusing is the fact that in Sarah Saunders' official statement, or I should say in her police interviews, she was adamant that she was told they were going to meet Mad Mick Bowman first. Before meeting Mickey Steele, they were going to meet Mad Mick Bowman. Now, she claimed that she heard that through, I don't know whether it's Donna Jagger's or Donna Jagger's told someone else and it got back to Sarah Saunders, but this doesn't appear anywhere in Donna Jagger's official statement. So it's strange. I mean, obviously it's more than likely that it's Tate who is seen by this tyre fitter driving down the road and when they're on their way to the halfway house pub, but we can't be 100% sure. There is a very small possibility that Rolfe and Tucker were in the Range Rover and they met up with Tate later on that evening. What makes this case equally difficult but also intriguing is the telephone evidence. Now, obviously back in 1995, the technology just wasn't there to be able to pinpoint people's locations. As I've said in many previous other videos, really all we have is a very approximate location for where these individuals are on the evening of December the 6th. Now, what we have in its entirety is Rolfe without a mobile telephone. He didn't take his phone with him on December the 6th. We have quite sparse telephone information from Tucker, and we have fairly sparse information regarding Tate's mobile phone. So there is a slim possibility, as I say, that Tate may have met up with Steele beforehand and then met up with Tucker and Rolfe later on. I guess that's why I find this case just so interesting, even after 2 years of looking into it. It's the fact that the evidence that we have is by no means scientific. It's by no means 100% proven. You need to remember that regardless of whether you believe that Steele and Womes are guilty of these crimes, everything was literally based upon the word of Darren Nichols. If you believe Darren Nichols, you believe his version of events, then of course you believe that Steele and Womes are wholeheartedly guilty of these murders. But the fact we have this sort of telephone evidence, which is quite ambiguous, it's quite open to interpretation, We have the different sightings of a Range Rover being seen with a white car at different locations. That's what I enjoy about this case, is that it's not an open and shut case. If you look into all of the statements, it seems to be quite open-ended in places. And I'm certainly not putting this forward, this theory forward of Tate possibly meeting up with Steele first as, you know, the gospel truth or anything like that. It's just simply a possibility. Because we don't have, as I said earlier, any eyewitness stating that Tate got into that vehicle with Rolfe and Tucker, the simple fact is no one will ever really know the truth. Now, one of the last parts I want to move on to is Craig Rolfe's body position when he's found in the Range Rover on December the 7th. Now, this has to be literally one of the most talked about points in this entire case. And it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago that I came across something in the Summing Up in Court document which actually answered the question. Now, a lot of people, they look at the crime scene photographs, they particularly pay attention to the ones taken back at the police pound when they've recovered the Range Rover. And a lot of people say, well, why is Craig Rolfe's left foot on the brake? This is something I covered in a separate video, which is on the channel, so do feel free to check that out. But the reason, if anyone hasn't seen that video, the reason why Craig Rolfe's left foot is on the brake is not the fact that he's braking that's the issue here. It's the fact that he's braking with his left foot, which a lot of people deem to be unnatural. The problem arose actually is when they got the vehicle back to the police pound, they actually had to reposition the bodies. They had to move the steering wheel, they had to reposition the bodies as they had moved in transit from the crime scene back to the police pound. It was written in, as I say, the Summing Up in Court document that there had to be some adjusting of the bodies, there had to be some moving of the bodies, and that is why Craig Rolfe's left foot is on the brake. It may well have been, and more than likely was, that his right foot was on the brake when they were actually discovered. The problem that we have is that we don't actually have any photographs of the interior of the Range Rover before it was actually recovered back to the police pound. And then we move on to the actual shooting itself. Now, this is yet another open-ended topic. A lot of people say that Tate was shot first to subdue him, and a lot of people say that Rolfe was shot first because he was the driver, and some people even say that Tucker was shot first. The truth of the matter, as with a lot of things in this case, is there's simply no way to prove who was shot first. That can be best used as an example when again looking at the Summing Up in Court document, where the forensic experts and the ballistic experts couldn't even agree on who was shot first. There's even a possibility that one of the bullet wounds went through one of the victims and hit the other. So the truth is, as I say, we just simply don't know. Now, from my perspective, a common sense perspective, I guess you could say, is I would imagine that Rolfe was the first person to be shot. The reason for that is because obviously he's driving the vehicle. He's the person that can get those other two occupants out of there. Really, he's the first person that needs to be taken care of. So in my opinion, the way that it's happened is that Rolfe is shot first, then Tucker, then Tate is shot in the abdomen. And what's interesting about this point in time is we're supposedly looking at someone who is committing a murder for the first time, as in Jack Womes. But whoever has committed this crime, whoever has committed this murder, whoever's pulled the trigger, has shot Tate in the abdomen, and they haven't panicked. There hasn't been, someone firing as quickly as they can and just trying to get this over and done with. Whoever's committed this crime has fired that shot into the abdomen of Tate. They've then calmly walked around the front of the vehicle to the near side rear window where they've taken aim at Pat Tate's head and then shot him again. So what I'm getting from that is that this is someone who has still got quite a good presence of mind. They're not, as I say, they're not panicking, they're not rushing, they're not overcome with adrenaline and firing off as many shots as they can and just making sure that they're dead. This is a clinical execution. Now, just to leave this video with a little bit more spice and controversy, we're going to leave you with an eyewitness account, a statement from a barman in 1996 who comes forward to the police and claims that he serves Craig Rolfe at 8 p.m. on December the 6th, over an hour after their supposed deaths. I'll leave you with this statement, and I'll see you all again in the next video. Cheers. The following statement comes from Stuart Armstrong, dated the 8th of the 3rd, 1996. Around the 10th of the 10th, 95, I started working as a barman at the Carpenter's Arms, situated off the A130 at Rolfe. The pub itself I would describe as a locals pub, with it being very cliquey. There is only the one bar area situated inside. There is not any video monitoring system inside the pub, basically because there is never any trouble. On either Tuesday the 5th of December 95 or Wednesday the 6th of December 95, and I think it was more than probably the Wednesday, I was left to mind the pub on my own. Around 1600 hours I started work. It was not very busy during the afternoon and into the evening. However, around 2000 hours it was very quiet in the bar area, in fact quieter than normal, when two men entered the bar. Both men approached the bar and I will describe them as best I can. One of them I shall refer to as male 1. I will describe this man as white, 30 years old, around 5 foot 7 inches tall. He had a stocky build. He had brown hair that was cut very short and brushed down straight, but appeared to be receding. I believe he may have been wearing a green jacket, but I'm not certain. The other male I cannot describe in any detail, other than that he was also white, but was also taller than male 1. Male 1 asked me for a bottle of Budweiser beer and a bottle of Two Dogs alcoholic lemonade. What stuck in my mind was that it was company policy to pour any bottled drinks into a glass, and as I started to pour the Budweiser into the glass, male 1 got agitated and said he wanted it kept in the bottle. I told him I couldn't and he accepted this, although he wasn't happy. Both men then went over to a table situated in the corner of the bar area near the fruit machine. Around 20 minutes later, both men left. I didn't hear any conversation between them. I was glad when they left because I was on my own. It was not until the following week that I read the Evening Echo newspaper, and in particular an article on a triple murder that had happened in Rettendon. To my surprise, one of the 3 photos of the 3 deceased I immediately recognised to be male 1 who had been drinking in the pub. The name of the person, according to the paper, was Craig Rolfe. Although I cannot describe male 2 in any detail, I can say that it was neither of the other 2 pictures in the paper of the 3 dead men. I would not be able to recognise male 2 again, and have no further information regarding his description.